For the past few decades, the bookstore's footprint has undergone many changes as today's customers turn to Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and Amazon Books. It wasn't long ago before they invested money in the now defunct bookstores such as Borders, B. Dalton, and Walden Books. If you are ready to ride down memory lane, we have a top 5 of the most recognizable bookstores that no longer exist. Before we get started, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and tap the bell icon to get notified about our latest videos and content. Number 5. Encore Books. Encore Books was started by David Schlesinger, who would later go on to found the Five Below retail chain. The average store location was small, similar to B. Dalton and Walden Bookstores, except for 2 large stores dubbed Encore Books and Music. The chain was eventually sold to Rite Aid in 1984, and by that time, it had 19 locations in operation. The chain would grow up to 50 stores, and Rite Aid sold the chain to a company called Laureates in 1994. Laureates owned another bookstore called Book Corner and operated a combined total of 71 stores under Book Corner and Encore's name. In 1999, due to stiff competition from Borders and Barnes & Noble and difficulty working with publishers, the company would file for bankruptcy and close all stores. Number 4. Crown Books. Crown Books was founded in Washington, D.C. by Robert Haft in 1977. The regional chain grew to 196 stores at its height in 1993, becoming the 3rd largest book chain behind Barnes & Noble and Borders. The chain was organized under the Dart Group. The classic stores were averaged between 2,000 and 3,000 square feet, while the Super Crown bookstores were between 12,000 and 35,000 square feet. The smaller stores would eventually become phased out in 1994, after they would become increasingly unprofitable. Between the years 1996 and 1998, the company would file for bankruptcy twice following a family feud and mismanagement of the company. This would result in over half of its stores closing and pulling out of many markets. In January 2001, the company filed for liquidation, in which many stores were purchased by Books A Million and remodeled that same year. Number 3. B. Dalton. B. Dalton was a bookstore chain founded by Bruce Dayton in 1966. He named the bookstore after himself, but substituted the letter L for the Y in his surname. Bruce Dayton was a member of the family that operated Dayton's department store, in which the bookstore operated under the Dayton-Hudson Corporation, now Target Corporation. The chain grew rapidly by having 12 stores in 1968 to 125 stores in 1973. By 1986, the chain grew to 798 locations, being second to Walden Books as the largest bookstore. Dayton-Hudson Corporation would sell the chain to Barnes & Noble that same year due to declining profits and a decrease in new shopping malls. In 1997, the chain had shrunk to 528 locations and continued to close many stores over the next decade. By 2010, it was down to its last 50 locations, and Barnes & Noble pulled the plug, closing the last 2 remaining stores in 2013. Number 2. Walden Books. Walden Bookstore opened its first bookstore in Pittsburgh in 1962. The chain would grow to over 250 locations within 15 years, leasing some of its locations within various department stores. Walden Books was acquired by Kmart in 1984, in which it became the largest retail bookstore chain. Under Kmart's ownership, Walden attempted many store formats, such as Reader's Market, which was a discount outlet book chain, and Walden Books and More, which included merchandise and software beyond books. Kmart would then acquire another bookstore in 1992 called Borders, but kept them separate until they were merged and spun off into Borders Walden Group in 1994. It was eventually renamed Borders Group independently after being able to purchase back its stock. In 2004, many Walden Books were renamed Borders Express to lower the expense of their Walden Books brand. In 2010, 200 stores were closed, with the entire company folding in July of 2011, when Borders Group filed for liquidation. Number 1. Borders. Founded in 1971 by brothers Tom and Louis Borders while attending the University of Michigan, the first bookstore opened at 209 South State Street in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in a former War's bookstore. Former Hickory Farms president Robert F. D. Romualdo was hired in 1989 to expand the company. Borders would be acquired by Kmart in 1992, in which it struggled with the book division. Kmart had already operated another bookstore known as Walden Books, which was mentioned earlier from the list. Kmart would merge the two chains in hopes of the experienced Borders senior management could help the floundering Walden Books. With many of the Borders senior management leaving, the company was spun off by Kmart in 1995. Borders opened its first international store in Singapore in 1997, comprising 32,000 square feet, making it the largest bookstore there. It would eventually have a total of 41 stores, being in Australia, Ireland, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. By 2003, Borders had a total of 1,249 stores with the Borders and Walden Books names. In 2004, Borders reached an agreement with Starbucks subsidiary Seattle's Best Coffee to operate cafes in its domestic superstores. 2007 proved to be a rough patch for Borders, in which it sold its Ireland and UK businesses, comprising of 70 stores, to Risk Capital Management. Those stores would eventually close together in 2009. In March that following year, it also ended its marketing alliance with Amazon so that it could start its own online business the following year. The chain would have financial difficulties in 2008, and Borders Group announced the intention of a buyout, in which it was rumored to be approached by Barnes & Noble. The company was also in debt from a loan with a high interest rate of 12.5%. The company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on February 16, 2011, and denounced a closing of 226 stores. A bid by Direct Brands was placed to acquire the assets for $215 million, but it was later rejected. After the bid deadline on July 17, 2011, without a bidder, Borders started closing its remaining 399 stores with a phased rollout. Rival bookstore Books A Million bid to acquire 30 to 35 stores and their assets the day the liquidations were approved, but reached an agreement instead to purchase leases of 14 stores, primarily in New England and Pennsylvania. The remaining stores were closed on September 18, 2011, with the Borders online store closing 9 days later, directing customers to the Barnes & Noble website. Well, that's all we have on our list for the top 5 forgotten bookstore chains. If you liked today's video, please tap the thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below if you have ever shopped at any of these bookstores, or ones that weren't mentioned on the list.